I'll concede your point just for brevity, but
What? Brevity? We don't do that around here. It's probably
No.
Citrus, or what is a Capital One Bowl? It used to be Citrus Bowl, right? Yeah,
oh my
Capital
God,
One.
dude, where have you been?
I just like the real name.
It hasn't been the Citrus Bowl since like, what, 2002?
What was your highlight side dish from Thanksgiving?
Oh gosh, Scotch.
This is the Buck Around, the podcast devoted to all things Wisconsin Badger football from a fan perspective. Featuring your hosts, Richard Branch and Maxwell Brusky.
And hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Buck Around. Welcome back to episode 340 of the Buck Around. I am one half of said Buck Around, Richard Branch. I am joined by my malleable colleague, Maxwell Brusky. Max, how are you, sir?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah,
Moving fast today, so I think that's a good thing for the program.
we have that's why we're malleable today. We have a lot going on. We need to be able to shift gears quite a bit in this show. It's like one of these where it's our first off-season show, which is always a different pace and a different structure and a different thing. But we have like 7 different things we wanted to touch on. So we have to be chugging forward, as nobody at home can see me doing my train arms.
They can't, but we're doing off season in December. Nobody's used to that.
Yet here we are. So why don't we get right to this?
I think we should.
We promised we'd come back if there was an OC. There is an OC named. He's not technically hired yet, but he has a little picture of Camp Randall in his Twitter bio. So I think I'll take that as much of a confirmation as I need at this point to talk about him. We're going to do more in detail next week, more on sort of scheme and structure and all that kind of fun stuff with, I'll give a little hint at the top with our friend Ryan from the Dairy Raid. But
Yes.
just sort of your top line, scheme aside, or unless it's really integral to your thoughts, like what's your take on Jeff Grimes?
You know what? I'm pretty good with it. I think like the, I don't know, I guess the narrative, if you want to say, is like not splashy.
Yeah.
And, if you want to look at the negative side, all the Kansas people are like, yeah, good riddance. He sucked. I mean, I guess you could say that, but it's not like Kansas had like awesome recruiting class. He's only there for 1 year. He inherited Jalen Daniels, who didn't do as well, but, came on the last couple of games. And you look at what they did to like Colorado. Like they put up a lot of points. And I think, what was it? It was like the first time in Big 12 history that Kansas had beaten 3 ranked teams in a row as an unranked team. As far as like the stylistically thing, I don't know. Do you count RVO as like a gimmick? That's what he apparently said, that he has reliable violent offense.
Oh,
RVO. It sounds like RPO.
Sure. Great. As I said when he was hired, I have no take. Like, I have no opinion, good, bad. I don't care. It's what it is. He wanted to hire the guy. He hired him.
Right.
So, great.
I think there's an element, though, of like that was the dude that he wanted originally. So it was like the first choice.
Maybe. Sure. I mean, it was quick.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Like he had a guy that he wanted and he took him from somewhere.
My only thought with him was 2 things. One, I was surprised that Fickell, like when a program fires a head coach, the kind of the adage is that they hire the opposite of the last guy. And I was thinking, when Fickell fired his offensive coordinator, you'd say, oh, he's going to go for the opposite of what he had. And you can say, oh, maybe stylistically or whatever. But I was more thinking along the lines of that hire blew up and the Bicknell hire blew up because it was 2 guys that he did not have any kind of connection to. So as far as I can tell, they don't have an overlap. I don't know what the connection is. I don't know how they found each other. Maybe we'll learn that, but there was nothing I could find in his bio that tied them. So that part surprised me, but I was thinking about him and thinking about a comp or what he reminded me of. And I posted this on the socials about it, and I knew it would make people mad. And I'm like, I'm not trying to make people mad by saying this, but the guy he reminds me most of is Andy Ludwig.
Mhm.
This is very much, I think, what Gary Anderson did when he hired Andy Ludwig, which is you hire a guy who is basically like, I don't think of this guy as having like a real philosophical rigidity to him, sort of like Longo is an air raid guy, and this is the way I'm going to run an offense, and it's going to be like
Right.
that. And you're not going to have this jarring thing where after a couple weeks you're going from using 7 running backs to 2, and it doesn't feel like there's sort of an inherent a discordant atmosphere, for lack of a better term, between the head coach and the offensive coordinator in terms of, where you think you're going to, build an offense out. Like this guy very much, he walks in the door and you're like, I want you to do this, like I want to have, it's going to be sort of like a more run heavy, but a little bit of mobile quarterback. And we're going to use some tight ends and we'll do probably some zone ready stuff in there, here and there. But that's what I want to do. And he's like, oh, okay. And the idea, I think, in Fickell's mind is like, I'm bringing in this guy who's in his mid-50s. He doesn't need much babysitting, which was sort of the idea with Longo.
Yeah, for sure.
But this guy, I don't think Grimes is ever going to be a head coaching candidate. And he's 56. He's on the back end. That's the same thing with Ludwig. When Ludwig came to town, it's like he was 52, 53, and it's like, all right, whatever. And he's also a guy who I just think, to use Ludwig, you had Gary Anderson say, no, we're going to use Tanner McAvoy at quarterback, right? We're going to have this offense that uses a mobile quarterback. And then it was a mess. And then 3 weeks into the season, it's like, okay, well, he's done. We're going to put Joel Stavi in there. And it kind of it didn't feel like, oh no, they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. You had big old Joel Stavi, who was not exactly the most mobile guy in the world in there. And it worked. And I kind of feel like that's what this is. He's not a guy that's rooted in, well, the offense has to run through a mobile quarterback doing this, or a guy who can snap a throw to the slot guy like that, or our run, we're going to RPO out of this, even though, we've got boxes with 7 and 8 in them, and we're sitting here in 11 personnel spread out, and nobody's respecting that it's spread out. He's just going to kind of go with whatever he wants. So no idea if it's going to work. That's why I said, sure, great. Off we go to the races. Those are all of my thoughts. And I conclude on that, Jeff Grimes.
I honestly don't have that much to add. I mean, you can look at past successes and, the offenses that he's run have had success. I mean, I don't, if the fans when he left were happy. I mean, if you look at what he went from Kansas, from Baylor, right? To Baylor from BYU. And then before that, Auburn and LSU. I mean, there's just not a lot to complain about, I don't think. I mean, you look back and it's a lot of success. So to that end, and I know we're moving quickly, I don't really have much more to add. I don't have anything more to add. I'm kind of the same thing, but I mean, it's not like I hear the name and I'm like, oh, that's terrible. or oh, there's a savior, so
yeah, firmly in the 80%. We'll see what happens. If he has good players, he'll probably be good. Let's move on to the portal.
You don't say. Yes.
That is the other big news. We are officially into portal season. At the time of recording, just for people who are sort of keeping track, we're I think about 12 hours out from Riley Nowakowski announcing his departure. I don't think we've had any since then. So my little scholarship chart here in front of me is accurate to the best of my knowledge.
I think to nail it as far as when we're recording to the narrative timeline, this is 20 minutes after the very trollish tweet from Tretch.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. From
so just to locate it in time.
Okay. So let's talk about the portal, and let's talk specifically about, I was thinking we could do what you want to do, what you think they should add. If you were Luke Fickell, what are you hunting for on this team? Because as of right now, they have 76 scholarship players. So that means they have 9 to give, right? Assuming, we don't know, but assuming the 85, and that's what he said he's working off. So we're not going to do anything different. until he says otherwise. And I guess, you know what, if you want to make it an even 10, just assuming one more guy goes potentially, just to keep the exercise simple, we could do that. Let's walk through the roster, figure out where you think you want to have a player, where you don't, and let's just do it. So let's start at quarterback. That was my big pregnant pause to indicate that we are beginning the exercise, by the way. Start with quarterback. Quarterback has 4 scholarship players. You got Braden Locke, currently, redshirt junior on the roster. Mabry Matoya, redshirt freshman, and then 2 early enrollees in Landon Locke and Carter Smith. Do you want to add anyone to that quarterback room?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it kind of depends to me. Like, you have to have an experienced one. I get it. It's 3 years in a row, but hey, man, that's the hand you're dealt. I don't think losing Van Dyke really changes anything and probably gives them a little bit more certainty. And my guess is probably they had a conversation with him. And I guess I read something where they would have said, you can stay around, till the spring or whatever, and, continue your, the rehab and all that stuff. But I mean, I don't, having him move on as far as, the X's and O's and roster thing, I think that's a good thing. But it probably, I also saw somebody say that they probably have their mind on somebody already, which I'm sure they did anyway, but I think that kind of cleared things up. So yeah, I think you got to get, somebody else. I don't know. I feel like people will laugh at me, but I was pretty excited when I saw the Miller Moss thing or Connor Wegman or somebody like that. If they can get somebody in that range that's got some mobility and I don't know. I was surprised when Miller Moss was benched because I thought he looked pretty good, but if they get somebody like that, okay, fine, which I think is probably the level that they'll do. I think the next question is, do they need somebody younger? And then I think you probably want to see what the Locks decide to do. And the younger one stayed in the class through National Signing Day. And what do you think about Mabry Matoya? I mean, I don't see him needing to leave or anything like that. If you look at what Grimes has done in the past, I mean, if he's like has Jalen Daniels type skills, which maybe he does, I mean, that works, doesn't it?
My short answer is I don't disagree with anything you said. They need one upper class quarterback, and I am curious. The only thing that's interesting to me is Fickell in that signing day press conference basically bemoaned the fact that they lacked quarterbacks. They did not have a scout team quarterback after he went down with the ACL tear, Van Dyke. So maybe they add a second, but in my mind, you're just taking one, and it may just be another walk-on, honestly.
Wasn't Milos the scout team quarterback?
Not after Van Dyke went down. He was the third string quarterback.
I suppose so. He was the third string,
right?
Yeah.
So he's taken a couple snaps here and there. All right, so quarterback's done. Let's go to running back. So right now we're both at 1. You have Cade Giacomelli, 4th-year junior, Jackson Akers, a 5th year, Gideon Atuka, Dylan Jones, Darian Dupree. Are you adding a 6th scholarship running back? Me neither.
Yeah, I don't think they need to, because what I would say is, like, fine, if there's a home run hitter that's out there, okay, cool, then add that person. But, like, how much are you going to pay for that in this day and age? Like, what, you going to get Quinshon Judkins or somebody of that level? Because I think if you're going to add, like, a veteran, it has to be somebody like that. I think if I'm right about that, then do you want another Tyree Walker?
No. I mean, you already have Cade Giacomelli. You already have Jackson Akers.
And that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I don't think you do. So I don't know, veteran running back? I don't think so. And do you want any like younger ones? I don't think so either.
You're just pushing one of your guys out the door if you do that.
Yeah, between the 3 freshmen this year that were true freshmen this year, man, I think you're pretty well set up for success.
So now this one gets a little more interesting. Wide receiver. Will Pauling, 5th-year senior. Vinny Anthony is a 4th-year, true senior. Quincy Burrows, 4th-year junior. CJ Williams is a senior. And then Joe Griffin, assuming he comes back. Terrell Henry, Chris Brooks are all juniors. And Kyan Barry Johnson, redshirt freshman, with Eugene Hilton coming in early. That's 9 scholarship wide receivers.
I don't see this as a position of great need. I mean, if you want to get a high, it's a similar thing. Yeah, if there's a high end deep threat guy and somebody who could complement a Vinny Anthony, that'd be great. Or even even a lead duck, but you're in a position of how much you going to pay for that.
Well, my question to you is, all right, if they has a great player, yes, but I'm asking you from the lens of the Badgers, have you seen them get a high end guy at any position yet? They really
No,
haven't.
that's the same thing too.
Yeah.
I just I don't know. What would you get? Like, or what would, like, based on that group, that's 9 scholarship receivers.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get Hilton playing time right away, I don't know. I don't think that's bad.
So my only thought was if there is a second or third year player you could bring in just for scholarship distribution, quite honestly, because you are, of your 9 scholarships, let's see, 7 of them are 4th or 5th year players. So it's just to maybe flatten that out. So I'm taking 1 wide receiver, and I'm talking like, I think they're getting a Terrell Henry type. That's it. It's a depth guy. It's nothing big. All right, so that's the one spot we're different so far. Offensive line, 15 players. I'm not going to go through the whole list just so we're not here all day. You've got the 3 coming back, right? You got Renfro, Malman, Brunner, and Benchwall, and you kind of think, like maybe Haywood or Barrett Nelson. Like, you kind of know your top group, right? That's sort of in the mix.
Really quick, though. What thumbs up, thumbs down on Malman and Renfro returning?
Not starting 4 new linemen is good for this team.
Okay.
For sure.
Wanted to get that out there.
So then you obviously have the 5 freshmen. Haywood's one of them. Redshirt freshman. Or Haywood's not. He's a sophomore, but second-year guys. And then you have 5 freshmen coming in, and then people forget Leighton Nelson, redshirt junior guy from Vanderbilt. But 15 total scholarship players at present. Are you bringing anyone in?
I am not.
Me neither. I think they're in a very good place, actually, on the offensive line, and I'm going to get to that in the next part after we do this.
And I think, okay, that's good, because the one comment I'd say now is that as far as depth goes, if you're going to have to start, get people in early, okay, all right, is it less than optimal? Yeah, maybe, but there's guys there, and there's plenty of good ones from what it looks like. So, yeah, I'd leave it alone.
Put a pin in that thought, because we will circle back to it.
Yep.
Tight end, 7 guys on scholarship. Ashcraft, obviously Nowakowski's gone. Seagraves is a 4th-year player. McGohan, and then Steck and Booker, second-year guys. Emmett Bork in early, and Nizy Davis. I don't even know is that how we say his name? Do we know that? I think it's Nizy.
I think that's how I've heard it, yeah.
As a freshman coming in the fall. You bringing anybody there?
Yeah, I think you need some.
Do you?
I think you need somebody. Yeah, I do. You had Nowakowski leave. Ashcraft didn't make the jump that you thought. Maybe, is that still possible? I don't know, because he's played a lot of football. But I don't know if you've seen enough from him, and if you just out of the room that you just named there, I think you do. I think you do need somebody for that, especially if they're going to run the ball more. I would imagine that Grant Steck will probably get more playing time in the blocking area. So I think you'll see him a lot. But yeah, I think you still want a guy, because there's no difference maker on there right now, at least that we know about. So so that's where I'm putting down 1. I wouldn't even be surprised if you got 2 of them. Like if you got one that was a catcher and then one that was a blocker. I mean, just because the numbers I think are really low if you want to have a run heavy offense.
I will give you this. You kind of have, I was a solid, not even thinking about it, just because you have 7 of them, but you've kind of made a decent case. I'll say this. If they lose a guy, like if they lose one of these tight ends, like McGohan or Seagraves or whoever puts their name in the portal, then I say yes. Because my assumption is it's going to be Ashcraft, because they like Ashcraft. They played him over Nowakowski.
Yeah.
And I think
yes, they did.
they're assuming he is going to continue to grow. I think or he's their only option, whatever you want it to be. I think he's probably, he's a much better blocker than he was last year. That's the one place he did.
That's true.
improve.
Yeah, that's true.
But Ashcraft, Seagraves, and then you're looking at something from a mix of McGohan, Steck, and Booker. I could go to war with that. I think I'd be okay. So I'm going to leave it at 0 for now. Let's go to defensive line. You currently have 7 scholarship players. Ben Barton, 5th-year senior. Brandon Lane, Jamel Howard, redshirt sophomore. Dylan Johnson, true. And then the 3 guys, Petaway, Akaponu, and Pavey, with Petaway and Akapono coming in early. D-line, what are you thinking?
Get as many as you possibly can. And that's great on Brandon Lane, but if he was any good, he would have played.
I know.
I'm sorry. And I think they pushed Dylan Johnson as far as you can push him, and I think he's got potential. But I mean, I would say this is where you want to spend the most time, the most effort, and the most money.
Yeah.
I think this is where you need to do it. And this is obviously, as everyone knows, Max's number one rule of football about interior defensive line. Okay. But this is where I think you do it, because they were inadequate and lost 3 guys.
I actually am not pushing Brandon Lane out the door, just for the record.
Yeah, I didn't say that, but I'm just saying it's not a building block.
What I was more getting at is I don't think you're going to get anything better in the portal. I am saying 2 D linemen. Keep everyone you have, unfortunately, but you're looking for 2 D linemen, and you're hoping you get in Elijah Hills. You're hoping Dylan Johnson is a 30 snap a game guy who takes a little bit of a jump, and Ben Barton is Ben Barton, and who knows what Jamel Howard is. But you're basically in the same place where you're rotating guys, and maybe one of the freshmen shows you something. But yeah, 2 D linemen, but that's just the market they're in. They're not getting plus guys. So how many are you taking? Let me put it to you that way.
Oh, I'd put 2 down.
Okay, so 2.
Put me down for 2.
All right. So you are currently at 1, 3. If you say 2 tight ends, that's 5. So you want to say 1 for the tight end? We'll leave it at 4.
1 tight end, yeah.
So I'm also at 4. Okay. Inside linebacker. They currently have Allegro as a junior, Tyler Janzi, redshirt sophomore, Tackett Curtis Jr., Landon Gautier, redshirt freshman, Cooper Catalanato, early enrollee, and Mason Posa coming in the fall. 6 guys there.
I really like the true freshmen. I think if you can add somebody here, I would. You can put me down for 1. Again, though, I think these are hard to find.
I think you're reaching down. I think you're pulling an FCS guy, and I think you're pulling like a junior or you're pulling a rental. Like you're pulling a bridge player.
Yeah.
That's what I want. Is just a guy I don't need a starter. I need a rotational guy. You're hoping for, gosh, I'm trying to think of a good example that they've gotten in the past of a different position group even. But I mean, I don't know that you're getting Jaheim Thomas. I mean, you'd like to get Jaheim Thomas, I think didn't perform to maybe what we thought on the aggregate, but if you could get something like that.
I agree too. Yeah, I agree too. Yeah. That one, I mean, at least, I don't know. Would you say he was solid?
He was fine. How about that?
Yeah. Not a difference maker.
He was like Trotter back in the day, but maybe not as, he was less of like an IQ-y player. Like Trotter was limited by physicality. I feel like Thomas there was a lot of, he guessed wrong a lot, right? There was a lot of stretches where he disappeared. Whereas with Trotter in that one year he started, it was like, he's just not fast enough to catch that guy, right? Or he doesn't have the lateral quickness. And you knew that, but he knew where he needed to be. So yeah, one guy there to rotate because Allegro starts, and then the other guy's kind of rotating with Curtis. And
it's one that if they didn't get somebody, I would be okay with, but I think they should get somebody. So I don't know if I'm ready to put that down for my number 5.
And we can say 10. You can go 1 over. So
okay, all right. Well, yeah, all right. And I'm gonna do that.
All right. So you want 1?
Yeah.
So you are now at 1.
Are you taking 1 too?
Yeah, I am taking 1.
You are
sure.
Okay.
I am taking same thing as you, rotational guy. Outside linebacker. You've got 9 on scholarship.
1 or 2.
1 or 2.
Yeah, 1 or 2. You have to have a pass rusher.
You would think that, but they didn't last year.
No, they didn't. The guys they got didn't work out. Let's just say, or they were not difference makers. Gerald Peterson back.
Yeah.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Right here. I mean, I think you need him.
You're totally equanimous.
He is. I know what he is as a player.
Yeah, which is a nice player.
I wouldn't even use that word. He's fine. I mean, he's not as good as Noah Burks. He's not as good as, some other guys we've seen in the past. He's just not a bursty guy, but he knows the defense. They seem to trust him to be where they want him to be. And, he's used in a lot of different roles, which is useful. So it's great to have him back.
And And to that point too, you see him not making a jump or anything like that. Like, which is,
He's
we
played a
know what he
lot of
is.
football. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool.
Right.
Yeah.
So just to review, we've got he's a 5th-year senior. You got Sebastian Cheeks, who's a 4th-year junior. Witt's a 5th year. Then you have the trio of redshirt freshmen in Heiberger, Lafayette, and Willer. Then Nick Clayton is in early, and then Jalen Williams and Sam Latege, I think it's Latege we said, right, are both
think
coming
so,
in the
yes.
fall. So
Yes.
they have 9 there. I would take 1, but I want, it's a bad example to use, but in the John Pius mold, I want lower level, 1-year rental guy. That's it. Because you're just bridging. You have younger bodies here.
You like the young talent.
They have numbers. I'm assuming something's going to percolate out of that, right? You got 6 guys who are 1st or 2nd year players now at outside linebacker. Someone's going to percolate up there. Like, going forward, this shouldn't be a position that you need transfer bodies. Like, this position and the offensive line is kind of at a point now where there's enough to percolate up in it that you don't need any assistance. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to need to bring in bodies theoretically if you've done your diligence. So I'm going to put 1 outside linebacker. You're going to go 2?
No, I'm going to go 1, 2.
1.
Yeah.
Because I could even see them not taking anyone if they're really big on Heiberger or Lafayette or Witt. Like, if those guys are ready, you don't need one because you've got a rotation. You've got Witt. You know what Sebastian Cheeks is. He got better as the year went on.
He sure did, yeah.
He's not super twitchy, but he's there, right? Like, I think he's an impactful enough player that he can be used. So, all right, I'm still going to go with 1.
So I think you feel the same way about the outside guys as I do about the inside guys.
Cornerback. I have him still on the roster just because he hasn't said anything yet. Ricardo Hallman is a 5th year. Xavier Lucas, true sophomore. Jay Harper and Emilio Agard, 2nd year freshman. And then Jameer Scott and Kairos Gaines coming in early. And then what's his first name? Is like Jakari Washington, I think it is. I can't remember his name.
It's Jameer, I think.
Jameer.
Yeah, with an H. It's not Jakari. That's a Gary Henderson guy.
Oh, yeah. Very good. Yeah. So there's 7 scholarship corners on that roster.
I would say, so this is interesting. I would put safety and cornerback probably together and get 2 or 3 defensive backs.
It's so funny. I was doing the same thing. So when I was doing notes to myself, I wrote 3 defensive backs.
Here's the thing, 2 or 3 defensive backs in between what you do at linebacker. That to me is 9, or that I get to 9.
So let's talk about safety. You got Austin Brown as a senior, and Owen Arnett is the next guy in line at this point.
I know.
As a 5th year, as a walk-on. Raphael Dunn's a redshirt freshman. I don't think he played this year at all. Did he? I could look him up on Focus. Well, you know what's funny? You start searching for Dunn, and the first name I see is Bobby.
Bobby Dunn. I forgot about Bobby Dunn. My goodness.
He's spring practice quarterback. No, he didn't play a snap.
That strikes me as noteworthy.
Yeah, you're right. So you're looking there. So you have Brown, Arnett, Dunn, and then 3 early enrollee freshmen in Moss, Dean, and Emmerich. To your point, I put 3 defensive backs. And it would be really nice if you could find a Jason Maitre. You know, like this would be the year, honestly, to get Jason Maitre.
Yes.
Because he would plug a lot of holes. Phrasing.
I agree on that, but I also think that defensive back, cornerback, safety, whatever, combine, put them all together. I also think that that's a position where you can find more people for less money, or you're not going to have to spend big time. You know what I mean?
Well, you're looking for depth. I think you're looking. I mean, at corner, I think you're looking rental, right?
I think so too. Yeah,
because
I think so too.
Lucas, you're not pushing Lucas off the field. Lucas is ready to play. I don't know what to make of Jay Harper or Agard. I mean, Harper played a little bit. I don't remember seeing Agard, but the big thing is if they get Hallman back. I mean, that will change things significantly. But I'm going to put myself down at 3 defensive backs. I'm going to go 3 to 4. That actually, I think, is the position of need.
And I say defensive backs, cornerback, safety. I think we ought to combine them.
Okay.
I think that's been probably the biggest story right of the transfer portal. That's how many defensive backs they lost.
Yeah.
I mean, the Braden Moore thing, I think, to me, that's probably the most surprising one, or the most, I don't know, the one that I would miss the most.
Well, he was the one who certainly you penciled in as the next man up.
Exactly.
And it sort of breaks that progression. So that one kind of does surprise me. But I was really surprised none of the corners stayed unless they were kind of told you're behind. Maybe they were told they were behind Harper or Agar. Like, I really don't know.
Possible. I don't know.
And then here's the one question for you. Luke Fickell really likes scholarship long snappers. And Matt Mitchell was on the pod and told us that is in the cards, right?
Right. And so, Pfeiffer's gone.
And Case and Pfeiffer is done. I mean, I'm assuming it's another rental guy, but if we write that down, let me see where I'm at. I'm at 1 quarterback, 1 wide receiver, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 3 is 9. That's 10 if I don't take 4 defensive backs. With 4 defensive backs, I'm at 11. So what would I give up there? Boy. I think it comes down to outside linebacker for me. Like, to get myself to 10, assuming, and this isn't like my needs, so to speak, but like based on what we know of him, I guess I would give up the outside linebacker if you're confident in those 3 freshmen. I guess that'll tell us a story if they're really chasing edge rushers a lot. I haven't followed closely who they've offered just because portal recruiting is super uninteresting. And let's see where you're at. You're at 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 3 is 9. 10 with the long snapper and 1 tight end.
Yeah, and we're about the same. What about this one? What about a kicker?
So the Gavin Lom thing is a weird one, right? Because they don't have a kickoff guy. They have on the team a young guy who's Sean West is his name. I looked him up. He was like he was 6'2". He's like clearly the most athletic guy on the team type of thing, who also kicked, punted, and he was the quarterback on some random high school.
Sure.
But he does not look like a kicker.
One of the classic Badger punters was in my high school class. Sam Veit was the same thing. Like, he was just one of these dudes who was, voted most athletic as a quarterback on the team, and he was a walk-on punter on the 93 team. And I think he wound up being all Big Ten. The other thing about that too is one of the things with that kicker, with the Notre Dame guy, who's the great punter and the good kicker. I don't know. Do you think that left them in a lurch?
I don't know if he was the kickoff guy. You're going to find a guy to walk on from somewhere just to say, hey, come on and kick off.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
That'll be a grad guy type.
I'm not talking, and I'm not focused that much on the kickoff. I'm focusing on place kicking, because the place kicking was really bad this year.
I don't think. Well, then you're gonna push Vakos out the door, because you're not gonna carry 2.
Okay,
that's fine. But I'm just saying they haven't done that yet. What I'm saying though is if you do that, it just doesn't change the scholarship count. That's more what I mean. We don't have to find a scholarship. Maybe they do it, but
I wanted to throw it out there. I mean, Vakos he's kickers. Do you think could he? I feel like he could come back and do just fine. You know what I mean? But I don't know.
He's the strangest kicker I've ever seen. He really is.
Dude, and that's kind of saying something.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really weird because the other ones who weren't very good, they never had flashes where you're like, oh my gosh. I mean, the first game we saw him play, you and I were like, this is an NFL kicker.
Hell yeah.
And then he's shanking 29-yard field goals. So I don't know. But all right, let's move on because we're keeping to our time, Max. We're actually on schedule.
We're doing well.
I wanted to look at something else. First off, big thanks to listener Eric, who did come through, came back after, I think it was 6 years, he and I were trading emails, to come back and do his second HTML scraping project for us, which he did, which was to look at Badger rosters and look at what I would call eligibility distribution on the rosters. Because as I've said, it feels like the team is turning into a barbell. Right? Like, you have a concentration of really old guys and a concentration of really young guys. And I said, you know what? This is something we could look at, and I bet the numbers bear it out. And Eric was great and pulled all of that data for me, so I didn't have to sit there and punch it all in or copy paste it and try to make it fit. And I immediately discovered something really fun, which is that The roster on uwbadgers.com is delightfully inconsistent when it comes to eligibility.
I've noticed that too, and not like doing the project, but I've noticed that as well, just over the years. Yeah, yes.
It's bad. I thought originally my assumption was always like they didn't track red shirts and they just did freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and then one year they started doing it. But I was wrong. I think when they have a really, go get them, sports information intern working there, who's the one that's doing all the roster updating,
Mm-hmm.
like when the go-getters there, they actually track the red shirts. When you just got your run-of-the-mill interns, they don't. Because in 2010, which is the oldest roster you can get online currently, they tracked red shirts. So you had, all 5 years. Then they did it again in 2011. And then that intern left and got a great SID job somewhere, I'm guessing, because they didn't bother to track red shirts for 2012, 2013, or 2014 until they did it again in 2015 for 1 year. It was a very short-lived intern. And then didn't do it again until 2020, and now they do it fairly consistently. However, it's a little funky because of the COVID years. Also, grads became a thing in 23 on the roster. Russell Wilson isn't listed as a graduate for whatever reason in 2011. He's listed as a senior. But it's like a kind of all over the place. But so I had to do some conversions to get my numbers where they needed to be or the rosters where they needed to be. So what I did, just because in 2011, or 2012, who the true freshmen were versus the redshirt freshmen, I could figure it out if I sat there and put rosters side by side, but I wasn't going to lose my mind. It was just going to take too much time. So for simplicity, what I did with everybody who had a red shirt, I downgraded them to the lower eligibility. So if you were a redshirt freshman, I made you a freshman. If you were a redshirt sophomore, I made you a sophomore. So on and graduates, I just turned you into a senior, right? Or some guys had the fun designation of sixth, like Ches Malusi and somebody else, I forget. But I made them all seniors because for the purposes of the exercise, that actually was the simplest thing. I then took them all and I spread these guys out from 2010 to 2024. And I looked at where everybody's eligibility fell on these rosters. Now, there are some things that are pretty consistent about the roster. It's always between 111 players and 100. The highest was 119, which was last year, funny enough.
Yeah.
So you've got the 85 scholarship guys, plus, you can do the delta right there to know the walk-ons. The other thing to keep in mind is since a majority of guys redshirt, especially the farther back you go, you're always going to have a preponderance of what I would call year one guys or freshmen, but still it sort of spreads out. So it was interesting to me. I assumed I was going to see, the roster again kind of expand on, as I said, on the bottom and the top. It didn't actually do that.
Actually, quite dramatically not, I think.
Right? And so I had them year to year, but then I put them in 5-year averages. I'm like, wait a minute, there's 15 years here. We can do 3 sets of 5. And what was interesting was back in 2010 to 2014, they averaged 52 freshmen on the roster and 16 seniors. So again, freshmen would be true freshmen and redshirt freshmen. So a big chunk of those are the walk-ons because they tended, if you go back and listen to our walk-on stuff from way back when, which I am going to, as I said, circle back to in the offseason, they tend to last 2 years and then 2/3 of them wash out. So that's a big accounting for the drop because they go from 52 guys who are freshmen to 23 guys who are sophomores and 21 who are juniors and 16 who are seniors. So you see the roster attrition there. Obviously, some of that is guys leaving football, injuries and all that, but a lot of it, quite frankly, is just the walk-on washout. But if you go from 2010 to 2014, where they had 52 freshmen, you go to 2015 to 2019, they had 53 freshmen. I mean, if you round it, they're both 53. It's 52.6 to 53.2. So basically holds steady, right? But what's fascinating is starting in 2020 and going forward, they now only average 47 freshmen on the roster. They've dropped 5 freshmen. But what's interesting, they've gone from 16 seniors to 22 seniors. And where they have definitely gotten heavier, like the barbell on the end has gotten bigger, but it's not coming from the middle classes. Like they're not coming from sophomores and juniors. It's coming from incoming freshmen, which really surprised me. Now, there is one part of this. There's a variable here that it's very hard to account for. And I was thinking about like, how do you even do it without going through line by line anecdotally? It's COVID, right? Because COVID gave guys extra eligibility. So you have guys like Ches Malusi was hanging around this year when he couldn't have in the past. And you have Brandon Lanes of the world who are going to be in college until they're 28, right? Like, the Cam Risings, all that stuff. You have, guys who can get the injury waivers. Like, so there is that aspect to it, but this thing really does line up well with the portal becoming a thing. And I guess it does make sense. The John Piuses of the world wouldn't be on this team, right? Without the portal.
Definitely not, no.
I'm sure there's both, right? The answer is always both, but I do think it's on balance portal. So it got me thinking, because I was saying to myself, well, is that, given what we've talked about, like where the Badgers are in the portal market, where you're looking at the grad transferee types and the second-year cornerbacks from Michigan State type of player, where you're really combing the beach for that diamond in the sand that nobody else is noticing, which makes it a really tough sled. I was like, how do you create a better scholarship distribution?
Hold on. The closer I look at this, though, if you look at that last year, where you have 2024 and you have 29 of the year 4.
By year 4, you mean players designated as seniors?
Well, 27, the year before, it's 27 in year 3, and the year before that, it's 26 in year 2. I think that diagonal line, as the progression goes on, that's probably a really important thing to look at too, because I think you see that when you go from, 2018, 26 year 2, 2019, 27 year 3. 2019 was a damn good year for Badger football too. The next year, 2020, is the actual COVID season, and you're down to 21. There's got to be something there.
Well, there is a cycle of available scholarships. The idea also, I should mention, by doing the 5-year set, was it gives you a full cycle, right? Like every player cycles through.
Yeah, definitely. I just think that diagonal line is more important as, that cohort progresses through the program. Correct. I think that's a really interesting one to look at. Anyway, I don't know.
So you just touched on very well something I have been thinking about, right? Which you kind of just said, like, for a program like Wisconsin to have those special years, you got to have like a group of players that work through. Right?
The diagonal has to be at a peak.
The diagonal has to be there, to your point. And in the new NIL world, right? Like when they're loading up on older guys, where are they getting them? They are not getting those guys that are core players, right? They're getting depth. They're getting fill-ins. They're not getting difference makers. So it's like, well, how do you move away from that and back to a model that would work, given some of the things we know? Because what do we know, right? You saw it with the 2023 class. I mean, that was obviously transition year, so those things happen, but 2/3 of these guys are going to be gone, potentially, or a half of the class is going to be gone. In a typical class, let's say it's half or end their career somewhere else. So like, how do you combat that? And my thinking was, you go big, right? Because I was saying, like I said earlier, about putting the pin in the offensive line. Yeah. Why are we not talking about transfer offensive linemen? Because they've taken 10 in the last 2 years. And they got Renfro and Mahlman to hang around. And they're sort of these bridge guys. But after that, you have like a laddered scholarship distribution that lets you put guys in. And then how do you keep feeding that monster, right? Because you're going to lose guys. You keep taking 5 guys every year because you're going to take 5 of them. And of those 5, 3 of them may end up somewhere else, or 2 of them are going to end up somewhere else because they're going to get lost in the shuffle. So I started to say, well, what if you take that principle and you spread it across the roster? And it kind of like in the process, it was like, okay, this kind of works. I say, what do you take every year? I say you take one quarterback on average. You take one running back. These are true freshmen, okay? 5 offensive linemen, 2 tight ends, 3 wide receivers. I have a little change from what I sent you, but 3 defensive linemen. I actually knocked it up 1.
Mhm.
2 inside linebackers, 2 outside linebackers, 3 corners, 2 safeties. So 5 defensive backs every year. And then what averages out to not quite 1 specialist a year between kicker, punter, and again, using Luke Fickell's love of long snappers, the 3 of them are scholarship players, right? Sometimes they're going to be grad transfers. Sometimes they're going to be portal. But just for simplicity, I kept it there. So that puts you at 25 players. Every year, you're taking 25 players. Now, those guys, those 25, you're going to get them to hang around for 2 years, right? Like that quarterback is going to hang around through his redshirt freshman season. Same thing with like we've just seen, these offensive linemen are hanging around. When did they leave? James Duran time. Well, I'm a redshirt sophomore and I'm now behind 3 other guys. I leave. So you keep those guys for 2 years. They compete. They develop. You get some depth. A couple of them are going to probably play. After that redshirt freshman season, that year 2, like let's use the offensive line. Those 5 become 2 guys because those are the 2 guys that start, right? And then those redshirt freshmen behind him are the fill-ins in the depth. Now those 2 guys hang around for a 2nd year, for a 4th year, right? And then one of them leaves early for the NFL, maybe gets passed by a young guy, whatever it is, and then you end up with 1 5th-year guy. You end up with 15 offensive linemen, right? Same thing happens with quarterback. You basically end up with 3 quarterbacks on the roster because you take one every year, and that redshirt freshman, if he's not starting, gone, right? So you have an empty spot there, but you're working quarterbacks through. You always have 4. It's no different than what they do now, which is take a guy every year, but same thing with defensive line. Like I'm saying, you're taking 3. Redshirt freshman season, those 3 still hang around, right? Because they're fighting for time. But then after redshirt freshman, one of them probably is leaving because he's buried behind the other 2. And then after that 3rd year, one of them leaves again, and you have 4, a 4th and a 5th year. So you end up with 9 scholarship guys on the roster. And I won't do this with every position, but it's the same principle where you bring in a lot. You bring in 25, knowing 12 of them are going to end up with you, right? And the rest of them are going to wash out. But if you do that and you follow that pattern, you actually only end up at 82 scholarships. So sometimes that's going to be the kicker. Sometimes that's going to be the punter. Sometimes it's going to be the long snapper. But it also gives you a little bit of flexibility to fill in at corner or to grab a guy at outside linebacker if you have bad injury luck, all that stuff. And it's like, that's the way they kind of got to get.
Or for a walk-on to go on scholarship.
All the same thing. Yeah, like somewhere you fill in a gap. Exactly. Yeah. All that stuff. So we don't know, again, where the roster ends up because walk-ons are going. We're waiting on all that to be decided because it sounds like those are going away. So you may end up at a 105-person roster. We don't know. But if we're working off this 85, like this is where you want to be. Like the age of 13-player classes are over. The Badgers used to have that cycle where you'd have, they had small. It like the year Bielema the year Bielema lost his, like the whole offensive staff, remember? When Chris left to Pitt? Like it was him and Thomas Hammock holding down a dozen guys. And I think the same thing with Gary Anderson's first year. It was a pretty small class.
It was. Yeah, it was.
Those classes are gone because you're just going to constantly need to get like 25 bodies in and, feed that monster. And that keeps you out of the portal. Now, the hard part is to get there, you got to wean yourself off where we've been, right? Because we saw them take 15 guys. Was it 15 or 16 last year? Whatever it was about that. And you saw them take about that the year before. They're way high. Now, theoretically, this is trending the right way, right? Because you and I are talking about 9 or 10. It may take a little time to get there. And who knows if Mr. Fickell gets there or not. But it's definitely where the roster has to go, where it's very young player heavy. Because like what I have there, like this little model I have, that's 50 kids that are 1st and 2nd year players alone. Like that's You know, when we looked at this distribution, like this year, they had 47, and that includes, 15 walk-ons, right? I am above these numbers they're at now without even accounting for a walk-on player. So it's like you have to almost bottom out to do it, in my mind. To get in this spot where, like, at inside linebacker, you're taking 2 guys a year, and you got, you're 7 deep at inside linebacker, which they're not far from, but where you're sort of laddered those scholarships more effectively so you can spread them around.
Yeah, it really does kind of show, though, when you put the numbers and present the data like this, you can really see what, those first 2 years are weeder. It's like weeder.
100%.
Sometimes when you have more weeds than flowers or vegetables. and then you have to readjust your distribution, or you get lucky. I mean, sometimes if you have 3 walk-ons that deserve a scholarship, like that's where you want to put those scholarships.
But I mean, those are going. The reality is, and I'm going to look at it, but my hunch is there are just fewer walk-ons that are scholarship worthy now. You're just not seeing them to the same number. I'm going to look and see what it is, but like Riley Nowakowski is, that's one of your exceptions. There just aren't a lot of them. I mean, it comes down to, for a program like Wisconsin, is you just have to nail your evaluation. And we're going to see really that. You're going to see a test of that this year. If these guys can evaluate and they can bridge through this season and sort of level the ship, maybe they can get the gears turning. But that's the.
I agree. This is a very good exercise. You are going to post the data that we're talking about here, so somebody can follow along if needed.
What I was going to do, I'll put it on the Patreon, because I know it's hard to follow probably in the podcast, because some of this is, especially the scholarship distribution stuff, is a little harder to follow without seeing it. But it's not that hard to basically, given what we know, just roll in 25 guys a year and sort of look at. Almost, it's like recruiting is almost becoming like minor league baseball. Where you're like, oh, my team drafted these 12 players. Maybe I'll hear of 4 of them.
Yeah, and I think like that rule of thumb is bring in 24 to 26 people.
Yeah, I think on that note, we will end this one, Max. We are creeping up on
so.
an hour.
We didn't have anything more to cover, I don't think.
No. Well, you and I do. Here's a little surprise for everybody. Not only did we say we weren't sure if we were coming back this week, we are back, as you now know, 50 odd minutes later. You're getting 2 shows this week. As we hit the end on this one, Max and I will come back and record the Golden Buckies, as they are known.
Might be silver for 20.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Maybe bronze.
A little patina on this one. And put that one out later in the week. And then, as we mentioned towards the top, we will again be back next week with Ryan from the Dairy Raid to sort of talk through what went wrong in the Air Raid and Braden Locke, and maybe a little bit on Mr. Grimes as well, just to see what he looks like. So I think on that note, shall we bid adieu to the listeners, and then you and I will just come back and do another one of these?
I think we are good until the next time, which will not be far off.
And for us, it definitely will not. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Enjoy the conversation? Head on over to buckaroundpodcast.com to find all the ways to connect with the show, links to our Patreon page, and feeds for every major podcasting platform. We want to thank each and every one of our patrons. You make this podcast possible. This has been the Buck Around, Badger football analysis from a fan perspective.
You just called him Jaden Daniels?
I said if he has Jalen Daniels type skills. And you can take the freaking recruiting rankings for what they're worth, but Matoya was a lot more highly rated than freaking Jalen Daniels out of high school, smarty pants, while you're sitting over there smirking.
Jaden Daniels?
I said Jalen
from
Kansas, not the freaking Heisman.
I thought you said...
Oh my God.
That's why I was like, what are you?
Your freaking ears. No, I'm like, talking about Kansas, like where Jeff Grimes came from.
Now I understand. I was like, what have you been doing? Down. Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah. You're right.
Yes, you could have looked at me funny if you really thought I said.
I
J.J.
really
Daniels.
did.
Okay, yeah,
That's
we're
why
good.
I was like, why is Max getting offended that I think maybe comparing him to a Heisman winner might be a bit of a stretch? Oh, I feel so much better.
All right, we're not editing any of this out, by the way.
Well, yeah, I don't know what we're going to do. Yeah, I blew the levels on that for like a minute. Anyways, all right. So